Chia, the way he rationalized his behavior was by saying, I'm not stealing. I've been successful in my gambling, so I'm just borrowing. My intention, by all purpose, is to pay back. I'm not stealing.
By now, Chia was living a totally double life. So while he was buying his young girlfriend all the finest jewelry, clothes and handbags, his family in Singapore didn't see a crumb of his winnings.
He wasn't living lavishly. Lived in the same house he did in Singapore as he had the properties. He had drove the same old car, and he told me that he did not even buy a pair of shoes for his sons with any of the winnings.
But Chia Tek Leng did start to change.
Eventually he became very flamboyant, from having the calculator watch to all of a sudden sporting a new gold Rolex, and he upgraded his car to a Mercedes. Not long before he was charged, we went up on the casino ship. There was a table set right in the middle of the ballroom, and that was just for him. And after the dinner, I had all these people saying, who's this Chia? I've never heard of him. Who is he? What's he do?
As he grew bolder, Chia also bought a $530,000 apartment in Grange Road, Singapore, for Li Jin to live in. Then he went even further to make sure she would never be far away from him.
Li Jin had a Chinese passport, which was very difficult for her because she didn't have a work permit here. She was here on a tourist visa. So all of a sudden one day Mr. Charles showed up and she's got a Taiwanese passport. And he says, you've got money, you can get anything. He told me it was $10,000 US.
He was growing more reckless in every aspect of his life.
For Mr. Chia, in front of his family, in front of his colleagues, his bosses, he needs to portray himself as someone who is okay, who is normal, who is performing his day-to-day role. But when he goes into this casino or some gambling venues, the competitive, the energetic, the thrill-seeking part of him will just get unleashed, and he will just turn into a different person, and he gets so sucked in and dissociated.
Chia Tek Leng had now been swindling the 4 foreign banks for 3.5 years. But then, an employee at APB noticed that company checks were being paid to casinos and even to junket operators. The Commercial Affairs Department was alerted.
In my time, what I would do in a case like this was to put a senior officer in charge of the case and say, look, please look into this. Your team deal with this. So about 5 or 6 people, led probably by a superintendent of police.
But that didn't happen.
What they did in CAD was to give the case to a young girl who was new in the job, and she was going to find out what he was doing. And I think they took about 4 weeks or 5 weeks.
The CAD slowly began to dig into Chia's travel movements and credit card use. Around this time, Chia also seemed to be feeling the strain.
He was always in deep thought, always a highly intelligent man. I can remember one night my wife and I had dinner with him. My wife turned to me and said, Mr. Chia looks like a very troubled man. She saw something I didn't see.
1.5 months into the investigation, the CAD had worked out there were 4 banks involved. They also realized that all the correspondence from the banks was going to Chia's home address. But they didn't arrest him, and he was allowed to continue gambling millions.
And if he was involved in gambling, they could have easily stopped him straight away. And then you put a stop on him and then you investigate it straight away. But I suppose in their case they were taking a lot of time to decide what they had done wrong. I think they may have been able to stop him from taking so much money. That is the only thing that they've been different.
Finally, another 4 weeks later, Chia was called to the APB office.
He was called by the directors to the office because the MAS officers, I think, were squaring APB on this movement of funds from Singapore to Australia. I think the arrow came up to Mr. Chia. He was the finance manager, and they found out that there were some resolutions that had been passed were not in fact legitimate resolutions by the board. He felt that was it. It was a sense of relief. He was frightened, he was scared, but at the same time relieved.
He was arrested and taken for questioning.
I went for lunch, Chia never showed up, and also my guest was there, was also, you know, where is he? And I was calling, he wasn't answering. His phone was switched off. A bit later on, we actually went to Li Jin's apartment. She was crying. They'd taken everything, all the gifts, all the watches. The police had come in and taken them all. She'd just been released.
It was a huge embarrassment to the banks involved and a massive job for the police.
I can say this with no qualification, that if Mr. Chia had not given the kind of cooperation and the kind of information to the authorities, to the investigating officers, they would have taken a long time to investigate the case, because the way the funds moved, the channeled funds, the places where he played, the people he met with, that would have taken time, a long time to discover.
In March 2004, the trial began.
That's when all the things started adding up. You know, like the time where he called me to Shangri-La Hotel, and all of a sudden I'm there with him entertaining two Japanese people. And you know, when I look back at it, you know, and the Japanese banks were involved, I you know, realised that he was saying, well, here's my Angmo boss.
Selena Lam was in court for the plea hearing.
When he pleaded guilty, it was obvious that he actually lost a lot of weight, and he looked really kind of haggard, and you know, kind of his hair had grayed. That's when his two sons wrote a letter to the court pleading for leniency, to say that he had been a good father to them.
Well, the emotions are shown, of course, when I read the letters that his son has written for their father. He was extremely sad, and he never wanted to get his family involved, especially his sons.
On the 2nd of April 2004, Chia Tek Lung was sentenced to 42 years in jail.
He got a really long sentence. You could get less than that for killing someone. Mr. Chia, you know, kind of threatened the security of the financial system. So I think it was really a very, very strong message.
He's a genius, because he could actually forge signatures, because he could get away with something like this for 4 years.
Chia was convicted of stealing 117 million Singapore dollars. He has already served 10 years.
I understand the family do still see him. His only regret is that he just cannot be with the family like a normal family. He tried to be useful in the prison. He's a bit more religious now. He's onto religion, and he doesn't think much about tomorrow.
Li Jin spent 4 months in jail for using a forged passport. She now lives in China, while her former lover serves out his time.